Hey you guys, how are you? I just wanted to take a second and talk a little bit about the poem that you had to do for last night. I know it's really interesting, and a lot of my students always find it kind of fun, even though it's such a weird, kind of dark poem too. So what I wanted to go through is just I wanted to show you what I annotated, and I want to talk about annotation for just a second. So basically with annotation, what I did here is anything that got my attention, I highlighted it, and then I put a comment out by. So I want you to think about these two things really having to work together. You really should not put a highlight by something if you don't put a comment by something, because the next time you look at your notes, you're not going to remember why you put a highlight there. And maybe one or two of the highlights you'll remember, right? One or two you certainly will remember, but you may not remember everything. So that's why I say, if you're gonna have one of these, you need to have one of these. Right? Okay. So, I just want to go through some of the things that I highlighted. And I think it's really fun to think about the different ways and different things that you can highlight. So the very first thing I looked at was, what's an artist colony? I know what an artist colony is, but I didn't maybe when I was a college freshman. So that's why I was like, I'm going to highlight that. So we know, well, now you know that an artist colony is basically this kind of commune where artists go and they come together, they make art, sometimes they sell art. There's a couple of them still in America and they're really cool actually. So, you kind of think of it that way. And so I do think that probably some of the people who were in there were probably a little bit more free thinkers. Okay? And so another thing that I pointed out was I looked at how they said he is young and she is specifically Japanese and almost 60. Why not say anything about him? So they're really kind of vague about him and really specific about her. Okay, my next comment, he thought he was in love with her. I said there's a lot of cynicism here. Our narrator already knows that he's not in love with her, so he's not going to stay with her. It's foreshadowing. We're going to see this go to complete crap. And I thought, I really liked the way they talked about this. He said he loved her work, and her body was like her work. And so he kind of saw her as like a work of art, and that is important later. So that's one aspect of it. But then the other aspect of it is how she looked at him directly. And basically whenever he had questions, she looked at him and she actually thought about the things that he was asking. And I think about that because it seems like she's taking him seriously. And since he is young, she may be the first person who ever took him really seriously as an adult. I know it's still kind of weird to think about it because my students never know how old they think he is. Do they think he's, is he 18? Is he 25? Young is so subjective. I really think that's why they left it vague. Anyway, moving on. I just highlighted, I think you would like to have me, and I put sex there because that's what it is. Let's not beat around that. So, basically, she says, I think you want to have sex with me. I would like that. But here's what's going on with me. She says I had a double mastectomy, but he didn't understand it. Ugh, yikes. I think that points to how young he is. So she had to explain it. And so I wrote young enough that he may not know what it is, or he's not thinking about what it is. Then here, this is a totally weird, different note, but I said the radiance that he carried around in his belly and chest cavity like music withered. A couple things. Number one, it sounds poetic, which is one of the things that's going to come up in a second. And then also withered. Withered is a plant word, even a flower word. So when a flower withers, it kind of slows up and dies, basically. And so I kind of want to think about that because later there's a flower thing. Okay, he made himself look at her, and I thought this was really important, so I put a pretty kind of extensive note on this one. It seems like he's disgusted by her, and that's why he doesn't look at her. But some things that I thought about this was, like art, he loved her art, and he loved her body, and basically at this point, her body is not perfect like that art. And so he may actually feel a little betrayed by her, which I think is really hard to kind of process because at the same time we're like, you ain't got no right to feel you can't feel betrayed by her, but maybe he does. And I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying it might be actually happening there. And then lastly, dead bees. What is this even saying? I don't know. We'll talk about that in a second. And then another thing that I thought was kind of important, she swept the bees from the corner of her studio. Why did they even add that part? Honestly, you guys, I still don't know. I mean, like, there's so much out here about this poem being, like, super kind of cryptic, and we don't really know. So, a couple little things whenever we look at the questions, and I saw y'all did a really great job with this, but the significance of the title of the piece, well, I really do think this whole poem is about her body. It's about her body and how her body is an extension of her art and how her body then kind of betrayed him, and so that's why he feels the way he does. My students often hate this dude, and I don't know. I don't really hate him. I just think he's kind of immature, and probably he'll be fine as an adult. But right now, he just seems kind of, I don't know, not great. So that's kind of what I saw with that. So now the term prose poem. Prose is the opposite of poem, like a paragraph. That's prose. Whenever you read a novel that's not written in poetry, that's prose. And so this is called a prose poem because it reads like a paragraph, but it's considered a poem. And so I think that's kind of interesting. And one of the things that we kind of think about here, and I think that's why I highlighted one of these things, is I do think there's some poetic language in here. So that may be some of the reason. It was written by a poet, but I don't know if that counts. That sounds a little iffy to me. And then the dead bees. So you guys, I have heard so many different answers to these dead bees. Number one, she was beautiful on the outside, like the flowers, and a bunch of dead bees on the inside because her body had betrayed him. One. Another one that I hear a lot of times is that he's like the dead bees. He was all nice on the outside and crappy bees when he wouldn't accept her flaws on her body. Then we kind of have to look at the idea of fertilization, which is about sex. But, basically whenever a bee pollinates a flower, there's sex going on there. And so it almost looks like this sexual relationship that was not brought to fruition. I think any of those three can make sense. I think you could argue that you're right, and I don't know that you could actually be right. But anyway, that's just my thought on the bees. Y'all, if you have any thoughts or you want to talk about it more, you just let me know. All right. Y'all have a good day.